AJ thinks I'm tall. I am not. Season 7, guys. Holy crap. I can't tell you how many times I declared during season 1, I'm not going to do this anymore. So thank you for inspiring me to keep it going, because it's really you folks that make it worth it. So, yeah, point counterpoint. Holy moly. This is a new thing we're doing tonight. All tandem stories. So 6 stories, 2 performers for 6 stories. 3 stories, 6 performers. There's a reason I don't do a math show. So 3 stories, 6 performers, 2 per story. It's going to be really cool. Because, how many times do we, we experience something with someone else, but the way we experience it is so different, or the takeaway is so different. For those of you who happened to be at the Calamity show, which was in season 4, I believe, where I told the story of my 17-year smoking habit that I maintained despite the fact that anti-smoking was my mother's personal crusade. That's a pretty awesome point counterpoint. Although, what would she say? She's here tonight. She doesn't think it's as funny as I do. So there's that. But that's what moms are for, right? That's where we learn how to argue and have the point counterpoint, no? Wouldn't you say? Okay. No, we never argue. Never. I'm actually so excited to get this going, so why don't we? Help me welcome our first storytelling duo to the stage, Steve Ford and Rob Ford. Hello.
Oh, hi.
And hello.
Hi.
It's a crowded stage, but I like it. Okay, so if you are new to Hearsay, you might not know that we introduce every performer with a question. Sorry about that. I'm a little rusty. I've been on vacation. So we introduce every performer with a question. All the performers are asked the exact same question, and it's just to get to know them a little bit better. So tonight, the question is, what is a memorable disagreement you had with someone that was on a topic of very little consequence, but to this day it drives you nuts that you couldn't convince the other person you were right? I'm sure we all have lots of those. So, Rob, what say you?
Oh, well, when I was in college in the late 70s, once somebody brought up at dinner the Dirty Harry movies were better than Clint Eastwood Western movies. We went round and round and eventually went to bed still shouting across the dorm room which was better. And it still isn't resolved, but the Westerns are far better.
Is this someone you're still connected to? Like you still keep in touch?
After that? No.
I think a Facebook friendship is in order just to get in that last word. Like, say what you got to say and then block them immediately. Ooh, that's not a bad idea. We all have something to do after the show. Okay, Steve, what's your answer to that?
Are you familiar with the media app TikTok?
I'll pretend I am. Yes.
So I'm on TikTok because I teach high school for a living, and my students have gotten me into it. This summer, I was filming a TikTok of myself in a grocery store parking lot. So I have my phone out like this, and I'm taking video of myself making dumb faces. And as I left the parking lot, this woman was standing out in the way, and she yelled at me as I drove away. She's like, "You shouldn't be filming kids." because she thought I was filming her kid in the parking lot. And I will never get a chance to resolve that. And from now on, I really wish I could go show her the really stupid TikTok I made of myself that day, because to her family, I am the creepy guy that filmed their daughter in the parking lot of the grocery store. And that will always be the story of me to that family.
If any of you heard a story about some creep in the parking lot filming kids, please set the record straight.
I was so sure they wouldn't. When I went to that grocery store the next day, I was so sure there'd be a sign, like a picture of me, like,
have you seen this man?
yeah. Oh.
Okay, well, let's give another round of applause for Steve Ford and Rob Ford.
So, just for clarification, father, son. You would think, being father and son, we would have a million memorable stories with two sides. And we probably do. But we're going to tell you of the most transformative moment in the Ford family history. And this is how we remember it.
So, as a child in the 90s, I do not remember a lot of stress. After all, I was 5 years old. My family had a small house on Spruce Street in the village of Elk Rapids, which at that time, believe it or not, was the affordable alternative to Traverse City, where my parents had met. I was a nice neighborhood, Nintendo had just come out, and we lived comfortably in our little house, and I was a happy kid. Life was good for a 5-year-old. What I remember was that there were always plenty of other kids around our house to play with, like all the time. And what I learned later on in life was that the reason why all my friends were always over at my house was that my mom was doing daycare at our house. So she was getting paid to watch them. One of my earliest lucid memories of us driving home from the pound where we had adopted this purebred Samoyed, which we named Cleo. And again, what I learned later on in life was that the name Cleo was a woman that my mom had worked with at a grocery store at her night job. So, being 6, I never understood the trouble my parents had to keep the lights on and pay the heat bill and keep food on the table. All I knew was that Mom was home all day with me and my sister and my baby brother. And Dad would come home at night and play baseball or play video games with me and give us bear rides all over the house. Everything in my little world seemed to be going just fine.
I remember telling my mom I was going to quit my job and start a business. And she said, "Who's going to feed your kids when it doesn't work out?" That's a cheerleading mom. Now, my parents were children of the Depression. You didn't do that. You didn't give up security for, it didn't matter how frustrated you were, how desperate you were. It didn't matter if you were looking for the American dream. You didn't do that. But that's what I did. And here's how. I began my career in the land title business. If you're familiar with the land title business, that means you're looking for the minerals underneath of it, and somebody needs to know who owns those minerals, who owns the surface. There's a lot of courthouse work, and that's what I did. Started in 1983. We didn't have any children. Between 1983 and 1987, we had 2 children. And in 1987, the oil boom in Traverse City dried up, and so the oil and gas land companies were laying off their people right and left. I was one of them, and I went to a real estate land company here in Traverse City. Started working there. Looked like that's where I was going to be for the foreseeable future. We were living paycheck to paycheck, but it wasn't bad. Everything was okay. We had purchased a house in Elk Rapids, and that was good. And in August of 1990, I went to work, and I was called in, and they told me I didn't need to work there anymore. And so I had to go home. So if you want a lonely moment, go to work, get fired, and drive from Traverse City to Elk Rapids, and think of what you're going to tell everybody.
Despite my parents' best effort, I watched a lot of TV. And I had an overactive imagination. And at that time, in the 90s, there wasn't a lot of TV for kids. It was basically Nickelodeon and nothing else. And even Nickelodeon in the daytime showed a lot of old sitcoms. And a trope or cliche on a lot of old sitcoms was dad getting fired and what's the family going to do about it. I remember asking my mom if that had ever happened, and she would deflect the way that moms do to a 5-year-old kid who wouldn't even understand it anyway. But I do remember one time my mom explaining to me that dad had, in fact, lost his job. And I was 5, I had no real concept of money, so my reaction was pretty calm. But the pictures in my head from one of those shows would keep playing over and over, and looking back on it, I remember feeling very powerless. Like, I wanted to help, but there was really nothing I could do. Despite that news, my home as a small child was still great. There was always something to eat, even if it was just a glass of milk or mac and cheese, and I'm not complaining about that. The lights were always on, the house was always warm, and my mom and dad always did everything they could to let us know that it would be okay.
So it had been 7 years, and I thought, well, maybe the title industry is not for me. Boom had come and gone. Real estate wasn't doing very well. It was in 1990, and the economy sucked. And at that time, when you went on unemployment, you got 6 months of unemployment checks, and then that was it. 2 months in, I was looking for a job. Nothing was coming along, and an old friend offered me a job at his other title company. So I hemmed and hawed, and I took it. I was doing way more for this company than I had done for the last company. I was getting paid far less for this company. So consequently, we were still okay, but we were in this spiraling downward. Every penny was accounted for, and it didn't look good. So one day I was at work, and a coworker, we shared a small office, he slid a piece of paper across the desk to me, and on it was he was the payroll guy. So on it was all these figures, and he pointed at one, and it was my name and my check come out, and I shrugged, yeah, that's mine. Then he moved his finger up the page to where the guy that owned the company, his paycheck number was. It was way bigger than mine, and I said, "Wow, that's eye opener." He said, "You can do this. You can run a company." And I thought, well, maybe I can. How though? As luck would have it, a couple days later, I was talking to a friend of mine that was a banker here in town at Old Kent, and I said, "Rob, I have nothing. How do I start a company? I have no resources." He said, "Is it a good idea?" And I told him what I had in mind, starting a title company in Elk Rapids. And he said, "We can borrow against your house." I said, "Hock my house?" "Yeah, if it's a good idea." I said, "Anything else? Could I use anything else for collateral?" And he said, "Well, if you don't think it's good enough to borrow against your house, why ask me to give you my bank's money?" So I hocked my house. Yeah. 6 months later, we had gone through the licensing process and set up this real small. Fortunately, a title office only needs you remember typewriters? Yeah, typewriters and desks and remember telephones, and the computer had not been brought into the office yet, so we did things with things called carbon paper, and copy machines were there, obviously. Anyway, we did it, and April of 1992, we opened our doors, and again, another lonely moment. You walk in, it's, okay, now what do I do? It's my first day. I've got no business. Now I got no paycheck. but we've got to get this thing going. It was a long day, but it was good. End of the day, Marcy showed up with the kids. This was a really cool office. It was an old bank, and it had a vault, like a bomb shelter kind of vault, cement walls and a big metal door. And kids would run inside and shut the door and yell as loud as they could. And I knew that it was going to be fun.
So, my baby brother was growing up. My sister and I were pretty active kids, so our house was just about as busy as you'd expect a house with 3 little kids running around to be. And our small house was starting to feel a lot smaller as we got bigger and also more aware of our surroundings and what was going on. But all of a sudden, we had a new place to play. Dad's office. It was situated at the corner of River Street and Dexter Street in downtown Elk Rapids. And it had this old, musty smell to it, and somehow it was ours. So it's growing up in a family business. There were a lot of it was an extension of our home. As I remember, as I mentioned, I have a pretty active imagination, and I watched a lot of TV and played a lot of video games. Again, despite my parents' best efforts. In the back of the office, there was the old vault with the big, heavy walls. And I remember one day, my cousins and I, we were really into this TV show on Nickelodeon called Nick Arcade, where you would go into the games. So we would go in there and shut the door, and we were pretending to jump into different video games and into different cartoons. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know who owns that building now, but if you go in that vault, I'm sure that just like any old house, our handprints are traced on the wall. There's measurements of how tall we are. It was, like I said, it became an extension of our home. One Christmas, downtown Elk Rapids had a window painting event, and downtown businesses had holiday images scrawled over the windows. My family and I stayed late into the night, painting and singing carols and enjoying the holiday season. It took me 20 more years to buy my own house and really understand what a title agency does. But much like how a cat knows that the computer is interesting because it's flashing lights and it's warm and, yeah, the cat knows that this is a cool place to be, but I was the cat in that case. I had no idea what was actually happened there, but it was my interesting place to be. Along with the office space, Dad's business had purchased a set of electronic typewriters. And it was 1992. The internet and PCs still weren't standard equipment in the office, but these things were banging. They had a little LCD display on them where you could type out the sentence that you wanted to type. And you could even go back and edit what you were going to say without needing to have a corrective ribbon in there. And then when you were all done, you pushed one button, submit, and the machinery would come alive. I learned to type on one of those things.
So it was 1992, and actually business had gotten good. Interest rates were around 9%. For those of you that don't remember those days, 9%, it was kind of high, but they began to cycle down. There was a refinance boom in the early 90s, followed by a tech boom, followed by a crash. Anyway, we benefited from that boom right away. I mean, we had business right away. And so paycheck, we had checks, we were paying our bills. We were able to pay down our household dough. And not like 3 or 4 months in, we had 6 years earlier when we bought our house in ER, we borrowed some money from Marcy's mom, and we paid her off. Yeah. So again, I'm sitting there in my office. All our bills are paid. And, wow, this is going to work. So, and I remember opening up open a drawer, and there was a couple more checks in there. I said, wow. And I came to learn a couple things. To me, that was profit. To the IRS, it was theirs. So that was a whole nother learning curve. And oh gosh, within 2 years we had moved to a bigger house. Marcy had her eye on this big house a couple blocks over, and we moved there. Lots of new furniture, put cars in the garage, and things are good. The things that I remember though were the everyday things. We had money to pay a guy to cut our grass. Marcy was working at the office a lot, so we paid a woman to help clean our house. Our office was located between a bakery and a party store and a restaurant and a pizza place, and I gained a bunch of weight. We hired a person to come over and make me do sit-ups. Yeah. That's wealth. I even paid to join a club with friends, became a Rotarian. Yeah. So it was all things I hadn't, a couple years earlier, that wasn't even on my radar. So, thinking back, it was all kind of organic, you know. My people were rank and file, blue collar, lunch pail. A generation of guys that dug coal were followed by a generation of guys that worked in a assembly line for making Model Ts, followed by a generation of guys that sorted mail. And I came along, and I was the first to graduate college from a four-year school. So that's like I said, it was transformative. And I had the skills to run a company in the right business, in the right time, in a town that needed it. I didn't invent anything. I didn't create anything. I didn't come up with some super idea. I just was there. And I didn't even think it was a story to tell until Steve said, "We got this thing coming up. You wanna talk about that?" And I said, "I don't know. I had never thought about it on this level." But two things. As I did, two things. One, when you think you're going through something alone, you're not. Someone else has the same story, just from a different perspective. And my mom, with her, who's going to feed them? It was probably a good thing that she said that. To her, it was reality. To me, it was a spark. That's how I remember it.
So a lot of things started happening to us that didn't make sense at the time, growing into my young adulthood as the son of a small business owner. The biggest of which came in the summer between 3rd and 4th grade. We moved into a much bigger house that needed a lot of work, but suddenly we had the resources to do those kinds of things. And the current house that sits at 318 Cedar Street, just a few blocks away from our old Spruce Street house, is nothing like what it was. My parents purchased it for, I think, $130,000 something there, and it just sold last summer for, I think, $500,000. Because it's Elk Rapids. Shade. But it wasn't just the material things. It was I had more access to ideas. When the office upgraded to a set of now ancient PCs, I had internet access in 1994, which will change a person. Even if it is just a blue screen with white text that supports a chat program with like 10 users. But that was my formative time. As I got older, I became enterprising as well. I had a little business where I shoveled snow for a few other downtown businesses. And I kept track of the books on the little keyboard-only DOS-based spreadsheet program that was on that computer. I taught myself how to do all that stuff. But really, the family got drug along kind of begrudgingly sometimes to a lot of Rotary things and business things, business expos. At least I was there begrudgingly because I was a small child and was bored. But, how these things are when you grow up. I learned a lot of things about how important community is, how important looking somebody in the eye and shaking their hand is. I learned all those things by growing up in the environment that I grew up. One thing I will never forget is the Post-it note that my dad had on the monitor of his computer. On the typewriter to begin with, but then the monitor later. But it was the same Post-it note, because I used to clean the office as a side job. It was an acronym, DWYSYWD. Do what you say you will do. years later, I heard him explain it to somebody. When you're running a business, your reputation is everything. And the most important thing you can do, if you tell somebody you're going to do something, is to follow through with it. And it's simple, yet effective. That's how I remember it.
Thank you, Steve and Rob. So, going through the gauntlet. Okay, so many of you know that I work as an editor. Yeah, that does not get me invited to parties, I will say. So I used to have a live-in boyfriend who, all right, you know what? I'm just going to go there. This is going to turn into a semi-grammar lesson here. But I know that many of you will, you already know this, and you'll appreciate me saying it. So this boyfriend would say, her and I are going to the store. Yeah. It is she and I, because it's subjective pronouns. But the argument, when I told him, you know, that was not correct, his argument was, that's British English. He said, American English, it's her and I. In Britain, it's she and I. And we broke up, not because of that, but that certainly helped grease the wheels. But just the fact that I never convinced him that, I mean, it's not a matter of opinion. There is right and wrong in that. So, yeah, if you're a her and I kind of person, that's okay. I'll just bristle a little. But do know that I will want to talk to you so that you could be the stand-in for my ex-boyfriend and you can say, you're right. Oh, my gosh. Even if you don't mean it. Okay. I'll take a lie. All right. Let us bring to the stage our next storytelling duo, Johnny Cameron and Elon Cameron.
Hi, Karen.
Hello, Elon.
Hello, Karen.
Hello, Johnny. Welcome back to the stage. So what is an argument that you had? Not necessarily between the two of you.
Oh, okay.
Although we will take those. They are married. An argument that you never were able to convince the other person that you were right, and it was really inconsequential, but you have not been able to let it go.
Is it inconsequential? Or what are you gonna do? Is it inconsequential? No, I'm you just do it. All right, it's about over or under. Toilet paper. When we met and I shared her bathroom 17 years ago, I just thought,
Wow.
I'm an over. That's... People fold the nice little triangle folds in the hospitality industry. Over is better. Over is better.
And I was like, I'm an under. It's aesthetically more pleasing. One person is like, yeah, I feel you, my sister.
No, I'm
like, over.
I'm silently with you here.
Yes, and it was one of those funny things where I was like, but I could make this change. You hear the weird things on, I'm in my late 40s, so the Donahue show, I remember it's never about the toilet paper or the toothpaste tube until it's about the toilet paper or the toothpaste tube. And I was like, I am not going to let it be about the fucking toilet paper. And so...
But I won.
Okay, I can adapt.
I won.
Rare.
I won. We're an over.
Yes.
We're an over household.
Celebrate amongst yourselves. then, out of nowhere, 15 to 16 years later, one day I go to the bathroom and there's a fresh roll under. I'm like, what the actual is going on here? Now I'm being messed with.
She really thought she was being messed with.
I mean,
But I had just adapted over time,
it was
and I was
never
like,
under. It was
it's a case by case
over.
experience. It's a case by case experience. Sometimes you want it to just fit neatly against the wall and just like pop out, pop out.
Didn't think of that 17 years ago. No.
But Elon did think I was really messing with her when I.
Like that. It really did seem that way. It was like very intentional.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, no, I will say that actually I was at an event a couple weeks ago, and there was a faulty lock in one of the stalls, and somebody got locked in the stall, and they couldn't get her out, and so someone said, all right, I'm going in.
That did not happen here. Don't be afraid.
Yes,
You're all
no,
safe. In the toilets here, you're all safe.
You may use the locks in the toilets here. No, so someone said, okay, we can't figure this out. I'm going in. And she got down on the floor and crawled under. And I was like, God, I would have climbed over. So bathroom over under spats are not limited to toilet paper.
New level, over, under.
Yeah. All right.
I do have one more.
Oh, Elon has one more.
I just have one more thing. And I shouldn't tell you this because it's actually a surefire way to see me just turn into someone with unbridled rage. But if anyone ever tries to convince me that the state of Wisconsin looks like a god mitten, I see red. I'm just like, I can't talk to you. I can't talk to you. I'm like, and Johnny takes over. They're like, she grew up in Michigan. She can't handle this. They're like, what about the UP? I'm like, I don't.
She's nonviolent.
Yeah.
She believes in nonviolence.
I'm like elsewise a mostly nonviolent person.
Okay. Note to selves, everyone.
Yeah, if you ever just want to see me twitch out, you now have the tools.
Yeah. All right. Another round of applause for Johnny and Elon.
You should have seen us at our wedding, fighting over the microphone for
fight.
the.
Yeah, now we each have one. Look out. We could be here all
Tell
night.
you guys
Sorry,
something
guys.
about how much we love you and why we're here together. The first time I met Elon was when I asked her roommate if they had a phone I could use. She pointed to Elon. And I managed to catch like a glance from one eyeball. She looked up, and I asked if I could borrow a phone. And she had one in her room with a cord.
Sorry,
With a cord.
not really.
Attaching it to a wall. And you actually had to dial it.
It was this way.
It was that way. Well, this was 2002, and it was a bit of an anomaly, even in 2002, that people had a corded phone attached to their wall that you had to dial. But nonetheless, it was a brief encounter, but I remember the room well. I remember reaching over a vintage British road bike parked at the foot of her bed. I remember a well-appointed cocoon of coolness, full of vintage objects and beautiful fabrics. I picked up the phone and called my girlfriend, who I'd moved to Chicago to be with just a few months prior, to let her know I was going out and wouldn't be home later. She didn't come with. She could barely look at me. She was like, yeah, I'm using my phone. You know. And then I went out with my derelict friends from Texas, and, you know. I let her know I would be home a few minutes later.
I don't remember that. I remember my housemate having an out-of-town visitor from Texas, but was in a pretty rough place at the time. I was in one of those relationships where the breakup lasts longer than the actual dating part. And I remember Joycelyn's suitcase in the living room, and I remember some other people around that. But I can't picture Johnny, and I can't picture any of those other people. I just like sublimated that and erased them and ignored them, sort of like my roommate's water bra that always hung on the back of the bathroom door, kind of lolling back and forth after the door had closed, something that I never wanted to see and certainly was not for my eyes.
Anyway, over the next year, I saw Elon all over Chicago. I would go to the women in director's chair, all night film screening and see this plucky, blonde, freckled cutie.
I'm a redhead, by the way.
I would go to see the Chicago Kings, which was a drag troupe that was emerging and like performing all over town. They were the hottest things. Straight women throwing their undies at them was kind of a hallmark.
Did
you
happen.
guys really did that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing her at, I went to the Lady Fest Midwest festival, which was the second of its kind, which was kind of taking over in the early 2000s. And they were, started on the West Coast and blah, blah, blah. And this band La Tigra, which is like just the crown jewel of the scene at this point in time, is playing. And there's this really cute, bouncy, freckled, in a Coca-Cola t-shirt, hand grommeted, dancing on the stage with La Tigra. And so I was like, oh yeah, that's a girl. I borrowed her phone. I reached over her bike and anyway, I finally met her at a surprise party for a friend of a friend's girlfriend.
When Johnny walked into Big Chicks, a gay men's bar in Chicago's North Side and Uptown.
Not a lesbian bar.
Not a lesbian bar. Called Big Chicks. Not a lesbian bar. Owned by a lesbian.
Common mistake.
Not a lesbian bar.
Big Chicks.
I'd been standing there making fun of my friend Ben, who I went to high school with, for drinking Mike's Hard Lemonade. I was like, if you don't stop drinking that, then these men have every right to hit on you.
His father used to be the prosecutor.
Yeah, he was the DA here.
Chicago.
Ben Schneider. Maybe you know him. Anyway, so we'd been fast friends since high school. We were next door neighbors to each other. We went to art school around the same time, different schools, same era. We had jobs. We lived next door to one another in separate buildings on Winona Avenue in Chicago. And Johnny walked in and walked past us and continued toward the back patio. It was one of those chilly spring days. And by a chilly spring day, I mean quite like today. Ben looked at me and said, "Oh my God, I've never seen you check someone out before." And I was like, "Oh my God, I did not. I most certainly did not." And we were starting to bicker about it when Johnny walked back up and was like, "Hey, anyone here know about a surprise birthday party?" And there's a little part of me inside that like gave myself a high five. And even though I was too sad to think about ever dating again, a part of me had a certain like, well, we'll see what happens to that. We were there. We were here for a surprise birthday party. Yes, we were ready for the surprise birthday party. The several corporate androgynous lesbians who were my housemate, her girlfriend, and a gaggle of other rather typical,
Pharmaceutical reps.
somewhat boring human beings arrived, and we all shouted, "Surprise!" And my roommate looked at me and was like, "You know I just came from my uncle's funeral, right?" And I was like, I'm bored enough to throw you a surprise party, bitch? her girlfriend was like, "Oh, baby, I know, it was my idea. I'm so sorry." And they like cooed and gooed all over each other.
So I was 25
A minute ago.
Single, living on my own for the first time in Chicago. Ready to put myself out there again. I was hungry for my people. I was hungry for finding meaning in the work that I was doing in my daily life. I'd left Texas a little over a year ago. There's meaning to be found in Texas. Not equating those two, but I needed to get out of Texas. And I found myself in Chicago and kind of like, I just go back to Austin. I just get out of here. I haven't found my people. I'd also just had major surgery on my tailbone. I had a huge bandage on my ass. On my ass. I had a big bandage on my ass. Which, doesn't lend one to like feeling themselves so much. I was newly single, like, all right, I'm in Chicago. I think I want to move back to Austin. I have a bandage on my ass and a nurse that's coming to my house to bandage my ass. Pretty cool achievement at 25. We're leaving out part of the story here, but anyway, that's, part of why I said yes to an invitation to a surprise party for my friend's girlfriend. I was like, yeah, whatever. I need to get back out and see what's going on in Chicago with a bandage on my ass. I walked into Big Chicks, which, as we've established, is not a lesbian bar. Don't be fooled. Not that I look like a lesbian or identify as one these days, but the afternoon crowd was already in good revelry. I walked through, nervous, very shy, and looking for a party comprised almost entirely of people I did not know. I walked past the bar bears claiming their seats to watch the endless flows of twinks and cubs and all of the flavors of gay male rainbow. And I saw this glowy, sweet-faced girl. She captured the entirety of my attention, and I don't know how long we were at Big Chicks. I really don't remember. I don't remember anything else about there, but I do remember the beginning of how we would share our stories with one another.
So we hung out at Big Chicks for a little while. The music was good, and people were kind of flowing in, and more people were filling the place up, and we all became clear that we wanted to eat dinner. Like, everyone wanted to have dinner. And the birthday girl was like, let's go to Bennigan's! And we were like, pfft. And so... Yeah, the lesbian faction, all in turtlenecks, interestingly enough. Anyone got anything for that? Lesbians wear turtlenecks? I don't know. Get back to me if you know. They somehow decided to go to some expensive, unreachable place, and we were like, we'll meet up with you a little later. And my friend Ben and I were regulars at this Vietnamese place on Argyle, which was just a block and some change down the street. And so we decided to skip the birthday meal, but promised to rejoin the turtleneck faction a little bit later. And
yeah, they invited me to a Vietnamese restaurant, and I was like, yeah, my favorite food. I haven't had a good Vietnamese meal in a long time. And Ilan and Ben invited me to dinner at the restaurant down the street, and we walked a short distance down to Nha Trang. And it was a full, like, family scene, like Mama, Papa, Nha Trang. It was a full family operation, and they greeted Ben and Ilan by name. Hello, Ben! Hello, Ben friend!
A name
for the
of
rest
honor.
of time together. Elon ordered some goiga and spring rolls, and slowly friends of theirs started to join us. And some were visiting from Traverse City, which I'd never heard of before, because I grew up in Texas. What is going on up there? And others, like Ben, lived next door to Elon, just a few blocks away off the northern part of Lincoln Park. And I remember falling into really easy conversation with this band of genuinely cool and kind people. And I remember being at home for the first time in a long while. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Like, I smiled.
At dinner, Johnny fit in with my friend group like a missing link. Conversation was fast and loud and ebullient. We were boisterous, and we had the big table. It was a tiny little restaurant with maybe 10 places to sit, and we had the big table because it was a special night. Mama and Papa Trang, or Lynn and Will, as they told us their names, were smiling at us. They were refilling our teacups. They were bringing extra food whenever the plates fell empty. And at one point after dinner, Johnny looked at me and was like, "Do you just live like this? Is this just your life?" And not really knowing what they meant at the time, I was like, yeah? But it was time to rejoin the lesbian faction. They'd had dinner at whatever corporate weird place they went to.
I think it was Bennigan's.
It was probably Bennigan's. And none of us had ever been to the bar that we were meeting up at. We were just sort of like, oh yeah, another gay bar, cool.
Madrigals. Meet us at Madrigals.
Madrigals, yeah. But back in the late 90s, early O's, like, gay bars catered to gay men in a very specific gay men only sort of way. Like, you were allowed to be there as a non-gay man, or as a non-gay man, but only to a certain point.
Don't interfere.
Yeah, no interference, and there's, like, heavy eye rolling, and then, like, you have to leave. So whatever else we were or are identifyingly wise, we didn't really hang together. So we would go there and sort of borrow time at gay men's bars, because there were literally 2 lesbian bars in Chicago, and one of them I wasn't allowed to go to because it was about ball sports, and I had nothing to talk to anyone about there. So
they're no longer open, by the way.
all lesbian bars in the country are gone. There are no lesbian bars anymore. It's a very sad thing. Let's talk about it after the show. Ben and Johnny and I walked into Madrigals with no clue what we were getting into.
Did we tell them what it was?
I'm about to.
Okay, good.
On stage was a very tall, blonde Yanni lookalike, wearing nothing but an amply filled banana hammock or G-string, call it whatever you like. My eyeballs had no comfortable place to land. And the air was really thick. It was a gay strip club. We didn't know that. And the older gays were like rolling their eyes. It was already happening. My roommate's girlfriend bought her a lap dance, and like the Yanni's friend, other banana hammock guy, he had a red, white, and blue American flag business thing going. Like, I don't know how it works. It was weird. It was very uncomfortable, but he was very greased and golden. And Johnny, Ben, and I basically stood at the like furthest corner that we could get to from the stage. Like we all did like some geometry, and we're like, this is the furthest point. And then at one point, Ben leans over to me and he's like, can we trade places? And I was like, sure, what's up? And he's like, this guy keeps trying to get into my toolbox. And I was like, it's because you drink Mike's Hard Lemonade. And so I traded places with him, and this guy's suddenly like, hey, can I touch your boobs? I'm gay. And I'm like, no, you can't touch my body. I don't care who you are. And then he looks at Johnny and is like, oh, are you two dating? And I was like, yes.
No. I just met her.
I was like, thanks a lot.
Clueless from the start.
So we're all kind of tiring from the scene. We'd done our birthdaily duties to the turtleneck crowd, and our diligence was finished. We were waning and starting heading toward the end of the night.
But y'all, it was a really weird scene. We're talking about a gay strip bar that a gaggle of sporty corporate lesbians had just
And
ended
us.
up at. And us. It was just a little unexpected for like how the trajectory of the night was going on. But you know what? We rolled with it. And I also gleaned some really useful information, which was Elon's default. And I got to hear someone else say her name. So I was like, Elon. Because I had a hard time with
Because they asked me like 15 times that night. Could you just say it one more time? How do you say your name again? Very nice.
But I
of you.
gleaned that Elon was at least interested in saying she was dating me, even if it was only a ruse to throw off the handsy
Boob grabber.
gay man boob grabber. So she walked me home. Ben went on his way home. She walked me home. I had a move that had worked for me. And again, like dating as a queer person is difficult. There's no rule book. Asking people out is hard. I'm sure it's hard for cisgender straight men too. You get nervous, but
And
like,
women.
we really didn't. I didn't get a handbook on how to do this, but I had one. Like, if I had invited you, well, anyway, I asked Elon to come up for breakfast tacos, and she declined, like a true lady, and wrote her number on the Chicago Reader, and that's how I got her phone number. And so I called her the next day, and we got lost in a whole other conversation about, I'm sure, an infinite number of blah blahs, subjects. But Elon, I invited her over. She had a performance that night with the Chicago Kings,
The next
but
day,
she assured me that she was going to come to my Cinco de Mayo party at my apartment where I was living in Chicago. There's more to that story, isn't there?
There's so much more.
We're so used to just...
So Johnny was,
Yeah.
and I could tell something kind of short-circuited in their brain. They were sort of like, but don't you want to come up for breakfast tacos? And I'm like, no. And they were like, ba-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da, like, does not compute. I don't understand what to do here. And so we like wrote our numbers down. They wrote their number down. I wrote my number down. Those were the olden times. And I was
pretexting.
I was really excited to get to know this person, and they were having a barbecue.
Yeah, and I had decided that, in fact, I was just newly out of this relationship that had led me to Chicago, and I was going to market myself differently. And I was going to market myself in a way that brought maybe more experienced queers into my realm so that I wouldn't be the docent. The first gay whatever / friend. And so, yeah, I am just tootling up here. And you see, it's really hard to figure out if you're dating. Am I repeating myself?
No.
Because this was 2002 to 3, which is AOL chat rooms, but very much pre-internet, Facebook, Tinder thingamajig, where you have a little more guidance in dating. And it was really hard to figure out how to date, especially if you're queer, because there weren't any written lessons. For the rest of my life. And so I dove deep into my literal closet. This is like the best part. I dove
really pretty
deep into my literal closet and found a Banana Republic navy split skirt. And I
For
paired
those
it.
of you listening at home, that is not Johnny's current wardrobe.
I have a mustache. I've always had a mustache, but I'd brought that split skirt up from Austin, and I was like, all right, this is the time. I'm gonna put on this apparel that says, hey, I want to attract the queer boss of me. And I'm also gonna pair it with a Baja, like a Mexican Baja, like purple shirt.
So I'd made a rule that I wasn't dating anyone under 25. I wasn't dating any vegetarians. I wasn't dating any musicians, and I wasn't dating any hippies.
When Ilana arrived at my Cinco de Mayo party, I was in the kitchen preparing food in my skirt. I turned around, excited to see her. I saw her lit up in the late spring sun, saw those eyes, and I completely clammed up. She had made me a CD of all of her favorite Slater-Kinney songs, which I'd been playing in the car when we met the first time. And she made an album cover with an old map. She handmade me an album. And I was able to muster "thank you," and then I completely ignored her for the rest of the night.
I was super excited to get to know Johnny. They were like so cool and maybe a little aloof. They were a very interesting person. And when I came to the Cinco de Mayo barbecue, I had all these things in line ready to talk to them about. I was like, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to get to talk about all these things. And they literally ignored me the whole time. I would be like, hey, I hear you like Patty Griffin. Have you ever listened to Cindy Callett? And they were like, yeah, hold on a second. And I was like, okay, my mojo is broken. I have no skills to reach this person. And it was...
No game. Mm-hmm. I had no game.
Oh, sure. We can talk about who had more game. And when after work the next day, there was a message on my answering machine. That used to be a thing. For those of you interested in technology, I'll explain it to you later. They invited me to come over to their place for leftovers, but I was completely reassured by their tone that this was a non-romantic hangout. This was a getting to know you friend jam, which was confusing because that night we stayed up till 2 a.m. playing each other all of our favorite songs and watching a thunderstorm. But then at the end of the night, they asked me the final coffin nail question, which was, do you maybe have a dress I could borrow to wear to my brother's graduation? And I was like, okay, check, not dating.
It's true. So, yeah, I asked Ilana if I could borrow a dress because I was about to head home to my brother's graduation. And at the time, I was of the variety that puts on a dress and does the dishes and does the catering at these events. And so I found I borrowed a dress.
It was like a mint green sack. It was
just like a tunic. It was like a bubble of fabric.
The least gendered thing that I was like, this is kind of a dress. And like they were trying to figure out who they were as a queer person and how they wanted to be in this world. And I was just like, I am never putting myself out there again. So like if they want to knock over bar stools to get to me, we'll see if maybe we can be dating. But I was like, we can't date. And they were like,
what was I like? Can we date? You're pretty. But all this is going on in my mind. I'm just like, can we date? Can we be together? But I've like asked to borrow a dress from her. I can tell that this is...
And so they didn't seem to know whether we were dating either, which was a relief in a weird way. Though after picking up the dress selections, which I'd carefully put into like the nicest paper bag I had, like a fancy handled paper, I was like, I'm just going to put a piece of tissue in the bottom as if I'm a fancy lady like that. And so they were there picking up the dress selections that I had made, standing for just like a millisecond in the entryway of my apartment where I had a collection of Magic 8 balls. I'm a big fan of Magic 8 balls. I had the Magic 8 ball. I had the Simpsons one. I had also a pink glittery one that was called the Magic Date ball. And some of you have used it. And after they had the nice fancy grocery store bag with 3 dress selections in it, they looked at me and they said something incomprehensible, which sounded kind of like, so is this an 8 ball or an 8 table. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And I'm pretty sure they said, never mind, bye, before the door closed in my face. And they ran down 3 flights of stairs and the door to my building shut in like record time. But I can't be sure.
So I found the opportunity to bring up the question that I'd had all night, and with the cool confidence of Paul Newman.
Or Robert Redford.
I dared to ask, is this an 8-ball? Or is this a date ball? And when she said, I'm sorry, what? I literally ran down 3 flights of stairs faster than I have ever landed, slammed the door, I was out. And, at O'Hare the next morning, I was like, 8-ball. 8-ball or date ball? What is wrong with me? I panicked. So my brother's graduation outside of Dallas was fine. I was trying to play the role of the older sibling, and with the makeup and the serving the dishes and the catering, and I was wearing a green tunic. I kept replaying is it an 8-ball or a date ball? And then my phone rings, and I've got a cell phone at this point. This is late 2002. And they called me a couple of times and were broadcasting some sort of live music. They said nothing. The mystery caller was, I don't know. They were just like playing music and broadcasting it, but it wasn't coming through very well. And I was like, oh God, I love that. I hope this is Elon. Thanks for calling me. I gotta go serve some taco cabana to a bunch of bros at a graduation.
So while Johnny was in Texas, I went to see my favorite musician, Rose Polenzani, who was performing at Shuba's that night. And one of her songs is about being queer and misunderstood. And it's a really deep, like wrenchy, beautiful love story. So I thought, what if I call Johnny and just play the song? Like, they're going to hear all the subtext. It's all going to be clear to them. This is going to be amazing because, like, this was me, like, really laying my cards on the table, feeling a little bit bare and vulnerable. They'd be coming back to Chicago, and if I'd embarrassed myself, that was fine because I was completely used to that.
So, I got a call. I called Elon, actually, when I got back to Chicago.
You left me a message, and I called you back from my cell phone.
Yeah, I said, I've got to return your dresses. But I get this call back from the mystery number that had called me while I was in Dallas. And it was Elon. And I was like, oh, you're the mystery caller.
So since they didn't hear the message, I was like, kind of relieved but kind of disappointed because then they still didn't know if I was interested and I still didn't know if they were interested, and then I hadn't embarrassed myself as badly as I thought. But Johnny had this big work summit thing coming up, like months of planning. It was going to be like 8 days of business, and they were really heavily scheduled, and I'd only met one board member that I recall. Her name was Tina. And when she said, so you and Johnny, you've been hanging out? And I was like, yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. We're just kind of friends. And she was like, you should go for it. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I think we're just getting to know each other. She's like, no, you should go for it. And I was like, ba-ting.
Yeah, I wish I could say we'd figured things out when I got back from Texas and that Elon showed up like John Cusack and Say Anything with a boombox playing a Rose Polenzani song. But still, we were very limited. We were like, are we dating? Are we not? Is she calling from a mystery number? We didn't have texting. This was not Tinderland. This was a completely different time.
A time gone by.
But it took a few more weeks. I told her I would like to take her for a little drive. We listened to something really cheesy, and I drove her down Lakeshore Drive, drove her into the Montrose Beach parking lot, and it was after hours, and we ran to the beach, and I looked at her and I said, are you ready to dive in? and I kissed her. And
So we were kissing at the lakeshore, and it starts raining, and it's like this outside. It's freezing cold, and the rain's like pelting us with rain and coldness, and so we're like, go back to the car, because Johnny's wearing flip-flops, because they're like, it's almost June, this is flip-flop weather. And so we get into the car, and we're steaming the place up a little bit, and what seemed like a moment, we heard this like, on the window. It was the cops. So Johnny rolled the window down, and I tried to be invisible, and the guy was like, "Park's closed." And we're like, and they escorted us.
They escorted us out on the trail, like where the people and the bicycles go, because it was so closed. They escorted us out. And I proposed to her on that beach 7 years later by asking her if she was ready to dive in.
You know, like I said, this is season 7. And I looked it up. That's the copper anniversary, which actually helps me to reframe something that happened to me like a month and a half ago. I was sleeping, and it was about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was leaving for Chicago later that day, so I decided that when I heard a noise, I was like, I felt like my neighbors were doing something right outside my window. There's just this little narrow patch of grass between our two houses. And so I was thinking like that they were doing something at their house, like right outside my window. And I'm like, what is that? It's so early. Why? But then I was like, you know what? I got to drive to Chicago in a couple hours. So I am going to just go back to sleep and hope that I can fall right back. And so like about 10 minutes later, maybe 5 minutes later, you know, I'm trying to fall back asleep. And I think, you know what? That actually sounded like that was inside. And I opened my eyes just in time to see a bat fly over my head. Yeah, I don't recommend ever having that happen to you. I mean, whatever you can do to make that not happen. So, you know, get to know me. I don't wear clothes to bed, and so I basically hopped out of bed and army crawled into the living room and went under the couch and got a sweatshirt and put it on. But then I realized I needed a blanket, so I army crawled back into my room, got a blanket over my head, went into the kitchen, got Tupperware. I don't know, someone said, I'm gonna catch it with my Tupperware. But basically, I was like, I think I got it out of the house, because I went and I did some maneuvering, and I was like, all right, I got that thing out of the house. But then when I came back from Chicago, I had not gotten it out of the house. It was sleeping upside down in my bedroom window. But here's the thing. So there was a hole in the wall behind my fireplace. And so I patched it up with this copper mesh. So I've decided that in some way, nature is wishing me a happy 7th anniversary with this bat in my house, because that's the only way I can live with that. Anyway, happy anniversary. Happy copper anniversary. If any of you know any other solutions for getting bats out of your house, party at my house. So, all right, let's welcome the last storytelling duo to the stage, Aaron and Ben Whiting. You can have this one later.
That's fine.
Okay, so what is an argument that you had in the past that was pretty inconsequential, and you never convinced the other person that they were wrong, and it drives you nuts to this day?
Oh, God. There we go. This is not actually about, this is not between us, but my best childhood friend and I, to this day, have this memory of a student teacher we had in grade school, Mr. Green. Neither of us can agree. I say it was 3rd grade. She says it was 2nd grade. We disagree on his first name. We were both passionately in love with Mr. Green. And every time I see her, to this day, this comes up about Mr. Green, what year. We cannot convince each other. So we went so far as to get the elementary yearbooks. Yeah. No Mr. Green, not in the yearbook. And nobody from our class remembers him except us. So draw your own conclusions. Very great. Very great.
Yeah, it's an argument I've had with a lot of my theater friends, and I think you and I have argued about it a little bit. If you know me, I'm not a huge fan of musicals. However, I really enjoy Phantom of the Opera.
Oh, that he loves.
And that doesn't make sense to some people, and they want to argue with me that I shouldn't be able to say one thing and the other. It has to be one or the other. And no, it's just the way it is.
Like that is the one music.
I don't like musicals, and I love Phantom of the Opera.
Okay.
Both are true. Both are true.
Yeah, actually, well, I've never seen Phantom. Yeah, I know, that seems weird.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
Experience.
Okay, cool. It's on. Let's do it. All right, another round of applause for Aaron and Ben.
As you can see, I have a lot of notes. I have this one half page. All right. So there was this magician 7 years ago, and he was smart enough not to introduce himself as such right at the get.
It's a rookie mistake.
He did not ever say, I'm a magician. He was an actor. And he was an actor who had come to Traverse City to be in a production for my theater company. And Parallel 45 was doing the terrible tragedy of Peter Pan. And this man right here was playing Smee. And this is 2012. And we met, had never met before this time, had never had any time together. I'd seen him a couple times. He was living in Chicago. And he came up to do this show, and he completely ruined like all my plans. I had things like really figured out. I was in a very nice long distance relationship. I was dating someone who lived in New York, which was really great. I got to go to New York every few weeks. He would come here. It was just after like a lot of like sort of crazy like early to mid 30s stuff. I was now in this really stable situation and really happy. And this guy was just nice. He was nice. He was really neat and tidy. And that's probably a sign that it wasn't, going to be the relationship if that's like number one on the list of his qualities. He was just so neat and tidy, and everything was great, and it felt neat and tidy in my life. And then I meet this magician who sort of blew everything up, and he was younger. And I had never been really interested in, much less dated, anyone younger. And I met him, and I was like really standoffish, and it was like, how old are you? Like 28? And I was really like kind of mean about it and like not nice.
I
and,
like spice.
And, like arm's length and like really rude. And for some reason, he was really nice to me.
I'm always nervous because I know where this story is going. And the first time I told it to my therapist, she just went, "Really? You did that?" But I'm ahead of myself. I was really excited because as a bachelor in Chicago, I had made the decision that a bachelor was what I was going to be for the rest of my life. It seemed like a solid decision, just ripe with happiness. And part of that is I get to go and I get to act anywhere in the world I want to. I'd been to Montana, I had been to Chicago, obviously, Atlanta, Europe, and now I had found myself in Traverse City, Michigan, playing a
The
very
pinnacle.
yes,
The apex.
playing a very off-white shmee in the terrible tragedy of Peter Pan, and then it happens. One day, the executive director of Parallel 45 walks in the room, and what really stood out to me, aside from the red dress, was that it was her birthday. And what she wanted to do for her birthday was bring gifts and lunch to everyone in the cast. She wanted to give on her birthday. And she was wearing a red dress.
Makes me sound
And those
so
two
good.
things, I was just like, hey, bud. My best friend in the world, Matthew Gutchick, was here. I call him Guts. I was like, Guts, what's her story? And he's like, she's taken, man, sorry. And I was like, I like spice.
It's never
And
said
so-
that before.
I proceeded to, feel things out. I wanted to get to know her best friend. I wanted to get to know her brother. If you'd heard previous stories from Hearsay, there was a crazy night with a DJ at a actor's house that we don't have to go into now, but check out the podcast. It's pretty good. And we kind of started to hit it off. Her friends liked me. Her brother liked me.
My brother really liked him, so already
And-
the pressure was like,
We got to the end of the terrible tragedy of Peter Pan process. The show had closed, we had done strike, and everybody's getting together at the Hofbrau at Interlaken to say our fare thee wells. But there's this little game they like to play at Parallel 45 called Yes and. And the idea is that someone says, you know what? Yes, this is great, and I'm going to add this to the situation. And you say, yes, you're adding that to the situation, and I'm adding this to the situation. And as I've said before, Parallel 45, they're kind of Jedi masters at the yes and game. So this little Hofbrau goodbye brunch turned into a 3-day reservation at Great Wolf Lodge.
I mean, where else would you go?
Drinking
Magic.
vodka cherry slushies, which ended up, someone rented a limousine. Was that you?
I don't remember.
A limousine to take us to sidetracks. And it really ended with me kind of being like, Matt, you're my best friend in the world. I know we'd planned this kind of road trip back to Chicago, 5-6 hours. However, I have the opportunity to talk to this really attractive woman for like an extra 3 hours. Would you mind just taking the car and driving the 6 hours yourself so I can hang out with her? And I'll get a flight to wherever, I don't know the hell I was going next, somewhere else. And Matt took a deep breath and he's like, what are the odds? And I was like, the odds are good.
The odds.
And he was talking it wasn't like chauvinistic odds. It was like, are you serious? Is this like a love thing or is this like a no thing? And I was like, it might be a love thing. He said, okay. So he took the keys to my car and he drove by himself 6 hours to Chicago. And I don't know how I got my car back later, but I did. And yeah, we spent 3 hours together and had a great conversation.
But then I had to leave.
Yeah.
Then I had to leave because I had a work trip the next day to San Francisco. And I was going to be gone for a week or two. And I just mentioned, I'm going to San Francisco next. It was sort of offhand. And the next thing you know, a few days later, as I'm getting ready for my trip, I hear from one Ben Whiting saying, you know what? I'm going to San Francisco for work, too. That's so amazing.
It was believable because I had been to San Francisco a few weeks earlier, and we talked about that.
He did. So there was it was plausible. And I saw pictures of him in San Francisco. He goes to San Francisco. This is a thing that happens.
I had no work in San Francisco.
No.
At least not insurance.
No.
Which is what I was there previously for.
So I'm in San Francisco. I finish all my work. I text him. I say something like, I'm finished. And I'm still feeling sort of guilty because I am in this other relationship, but we're just going to hang out. And so, hey, are you here? And he responds.
Yeah, she's like, hey, I actually done with my meetings early. Is there any chance you could be done with your work early? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to do my best to see what can happen. Turns out I can because I have no work. What I did not have, however, was a hotel reservation anywhere because there was some huge tech conference happening in San Francisco.
The Salesforce conference.
I ended up staying in a hostel across from Berkeley, run by a man named Yaw. Had a communal shower with no curtains. But you know what? I told her, I was like, yeah, I got a great place to stay. It's fine. Let's hang out.
He was so cool. And so I picked him up. I had a rental car from work. I picked him up at an IHOP. Like, didn't question why he was just sitting outside this IHOP after all of his work. Cool, let's drive across the bridge. Let's go to Marin. This will be great. This will be so fun. So we have a wonderful weekend. It's magical. We play each other favorite songs. We drink endless mimosas. It's sort of perfect. And he has me at this point because he did the thing that so few people do, is he showed up. He didn't just talk about it, like, he's there. I don't know it's under completely false pretenses.
She did eventually. Before I left, I was like, just so you know, I didn't have any work here, but I am really kind of into you.
Just like that.
But
Just like that.
I have been burned. In high school, there was this girl who was like always saying
the cautionary tale.
Tiffany
Here it comes.
Snell, like, oh my God.
Tiffany Snell. Don't want to be Tiffany
and
Snell.
she was just like, yeah, maybe in a week I'll break up with this guy and then we'll be together and we'll get married and it'll be great. And I was like, okay. So no.
So the fear here, I'm already like about to be Tiffany Snell.
Right, the scar is deep. The scar is deep. So I was like, look, Aaron, all my cards are on the table. I'm really into you. I came up here just to tell you that, essentially. But I also have to respect myself. So after this weekend, you have a decision to make. You can continue dating the guy, and if that's what you choose, that's great. We're gonna be great friends, I can tell. Or if you want to take it to the next level with us, that's great too. But we can't communicate until you make that decision because I'm not gonna be dragged through the mud. Of course, I had plans. I got home, I told her that, and I made a mixtape.
Mixed CDs, you know, it was 2012.
2012. So I made like 2 or 3 CDs
of our entire weekend.
Of the weekend.
Each day.
And I didn't label it with the songs. I labeled it with the moments that we had been hanging out.
Yeah.
And I made it out of construction paper, handmade CD covers. And I just sent that to her in the mail. But I was also still like, you can't talk to me. You have to make a decision.
This is rough. So I have the CDs, and for whatever reason, I just cannot let go of the guy who's so neat and tidy and so nice, and he just makes so much sense, and I feel guilty, and I'm like not quite trusting this, and I'm like, well, I'll just do nothing, and maybe that will work somehow. So I don't do anything.
You ever been there?
I kind of wait, and he's back in Chicago, and his roommate for a short period of time in Chicago is my best friend's fiance. So I now have a direct sort of, well, 2 people pipeline to what's happening in his life and in his apartment.
More
fiance,
importantly,
best friend, me daily.
More importantly, I have a direct pipeline to Aaron. Because after I left this weekend, I was playing it cool. Like, yeah, you know, I have to respect myself. You have a decision to make. You're not going to hear from me until you do. I get home, and this is where my therapist says I slowly started to go insane.
It was all good till that moment.
And so I'm like, all right, I have to do something. So I sign up on Match.com, I go on a few dates, and I go on one date with this girl named Jill. I forget her last name, Jill. We went to Panera, which kind of tells you everything you need to know. It was a fine, dandy date. She was charming. She was an actress. She bought me a chocolate chip cookie. And I knew it was done with Jill. But I get back to my apartment, and I'm going insane. And Noah, my roommate, says, "So how did the date go with Jill?" And I was like, you know what? What if I tell just like the smallest fib? The smallest fib. Knowing that Noah would tell his fiance, who is Aaron's best friend, who would tell her. And I was like, you know what? Jill's fantastic. We had an amazing time. A great she bought me a cookie. And Noah was like, Ben, that sounds awesome. Are you going to see her again? Yes, of course.
Immediate, like,
I was like, we're hanging out next Tuesday. And Noah's like, that's great, Ben. Fantastic.
So I'm in Traverse City, and I'm getting daily reports. And my friend Kit, she's a director. She knows what she wants the end game. Like, she knows where she wants it to go. So she is very good at setting the players in motion and deciding who should say and do what. So she, knowing that she wants this to work out with me in bed, I mean, she's telling me what Noah is telling her, but it's also just amped up one level. You know, oh, there's this, he's dating a lot. He's dating dozens of women, and Jill was really standing out, is the story I'm getting of this girl named Jill. And I'm hearing about their dates over the course of several weeks, of how great these dates are, how amazing.
So I'm stupid. I think that, if I just tell this one little micro fib, Erin's not gonna be able to contain herself. She's gonna drive straight down to Chicago and say, I love you. But she didn't. And Tuesday came around.
Still agonizing in Traverse City.
And Noah's like, are you excited about your date tonight? And I'm like, yeah, I can't wait. And I'm stuck in my head because I don't want to confess to Noah, because then Noah would have to either lie to his fiance or ask his fiance to lie to my future fiance. And so I was like, look, in my head, the rationale was like, okay, if there's gonna be someone to blame in this, I only want it to be me. So I started getting dressed for the date. I put my cologne on, and Noah's like, you got the address? I was like, yeah, I'm going to her place. And he's like waving like, good luck tonight, Ben. And I'm like, thanks, buddy. And I get in my car and I just kind of drive. And I go to this like little jazz club and just kind of sit there by myself. And I'm like, well, maybe by the end of tonight, she'll make a decision.
Well, that's because I heard about the date from Kit. I heard the report.
So she didn't make a decision that night, and I got home, and I was really struggling because I was like, oh God, what do I do? Do I just confess everything, or do I lean into the lie I've told? I was like, let's just lean in a little bit more. And you know, my actor theater brain was kind of like, all right, Ben, you better make this story good. And so frankly, I lied. I don't know what I said, but it was something about like she should.
Oh, I know what you said. Or as the game of telephone went, the salient points that really made me think, it wasn't like them going to the Violet Hour many dates earlier, like all these fancy things they did now. It's that he was impressed with the way she casually opened the door, having just showered, wet hair. You know, ratty t-shirt, jeans, bare feet. I remember it so well. She made him dinner, pasta. The details are important. She made pasta, And at the end, when Noah is asking him, about the conversation and about the dinner, the takeaway that Noah passed on was, well, he didn't like her pasta, but he liked her answers. I'm like, answers? Oh my God. So I'm panicked, not because of the answers. I'm like, I got answers. That's no problem. It was the pasta. If he was that discriminating, I was like, I am not a cook. He's from the South. He probably cares about women being little homemakers, and he's really discriminating about food. And what am I going to do? And he was discriminating about her pasta. That was the big thing I was worried about. I was like, well, it's done. I'm never going to impress him with my pasta either. But this whole story, Jill had become this larger than life thing in my mind to the point where I was not ready to make the move and go down to Chicago because I was going to have to duke it out with Jill. And I didn't know if I could win the fight with Jill.
All the while, I've gone on 3 dates with Jill, and it's been a lot of fun sitting by myself at the jazz club. It's a great Ethiopian place across from the Green Mill in Chicago. I had a lot of great writing doing there. And Noah's just finally at the point, he's like, dude, Ben, Jill sounds awesome. I want to hang out with Jill. And I was like, man, you should hang out with Jill. Just, at this point, the dice have been rolled. I don't know what's going to happen. I could be completely screwed, or, it could work out, but, I've made my bed, so I'm going to lie in it. And he's like, yeah, dude, all right, cool, let's go meet Jill. I was like, all right, and let's she's in a play right now, so give her 2 or 3 weeks, and I think we're definitely we're gonna hang out. I think this is what it said. I think Aaron is a done deal.
And this is what did it for me. It was that friends were getting involved. When I heard that the friend that Noah was going to start hanging out with Jill, and Kit calls me Aaron, I think this is it. I think it's for real. Noah's going to hang out with her, and Noah's kind of a little antisocial, really discriminating. Even Noah wants to hang out with Jill, so it's probably over for me. But then I thought, no, I can't go down like that. And so it was Noah wanting to hang out with Jill. I said, okay, I'm gonna go down to Chicago and shut this down. This Jill business is done. And but I couldn't go alone, so I took my brother, and we went to Chicago. We drove to Chicago for a weekend. Everyone was going down to see a show.
There's also, you should mention your relationship status when you came down.
Oh, right. So I broke up with my nice, neat and tidy boyfriend in a very nice, neat and tidy way. Yes, we ended that. It was so not clean or elegant.
I also understand the reticence to clap because I'm in therapy and she's told me you shouldn't clap for that. So you're good on you.
I broke up with neat and tidy, got in the car, and we headed to Chicago. And I'm still a little bit nervous because, maybe he's going to be like, you took too long. Jill's here. Do you want to meet her? I'm fully prepared to meet Jill.
So Erin shows up and she's just like, so I know about Jill.
And I've tried to be so respectful and own it that I took a really long time and maybe he's happy.
She's like, I broke up with my boyfriend and I would like to pursue something with you.
It was really formal, that was a job offer.
Yeah, I know. She's like,
thank you.
And I'm like,
it's all nervous and sweaty.
And everyone is like, are you gonna call? Do you think you can call it off with Jill? Is that gonna be awkward for you? And I'm like, I think I got it.
And so
I go into the bathroom with my iPad and I'm 10 minutes later, come out it's good.
We're all
took
done
care of
with
it.
Jill.
Look at me and my manliness, able to have a conversation.
Yep, just real direct. So
we had a great weekend.
Thus it began that we were finally together,
yes,
talking to each other, filled with truth and honesty, just the kind of relationship I was looking for and wanted.
Wasn't impulsive in the least.
And then fast forward 3 months later.
3 months later, we are at her family cabin, and I propose to Erin. And she says
3
yes.
months later. Yeah.
And she says, and here it comes, she says, it's so great to be in a relationship that is open and honest, with no lies or concealments. And I'm just like, I have one thing I need to tell you.
I I've already said yes.
One
by the way.
small detail. Do you remember? I don't know if maybe you might not have heard because you were in Traverse City. There was this girl I was kind of sort of dating called Jill, named Jill.
Kind of remember her, whatever. I don't know.
And it was less of kinda and more of sorta. Because she while she existed, I only went on one date with her. And then I paused and I looked. And not unlike the face she has right now. Her mouth opened, but it had a pretty big smile on it.
I would just paused trying to figure out. It was like, is this the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me? Is this the moment in the Lifetime movie where everyone's like, don't marry him, get out. He created a fake person. Don't marry
She
him.
wasn't fake. She was just expounded upon.
It was Jill Prime, and then we got to the exponential Jill.
But I also explained, like, it wasn't necessarily just an outright, like, manipulation. It was that, but it was like
He had a really
it was a
good
snowball
answer.
that got out of control, and I didn't want anyone else to be culpable except for me.
So nice. So I smiled, and I just said, well played, sir. and here we are today.
Thank you. They say the fine line between stupidity and courage is drawn by success, and you're without a doubt the most successful thing in my life.